People hungry for some good news, all punctuated with stories of strange plants, of massive and primal forests, of crystal rivers, of wildlife frightening and beautiful, air so fresh that each breath would remind you of Adam's first gasp in Eden. Well, the anxious bishop heard these words and set his imagination going, and we can hear them saying next to a fire one night, Where should this mission be located? History echoes with a very simple, providential, and Trinitarian reply. There is a place, there is a valley along the Watauga where three creeks converge. Those familiar with Levi Eisen, we heard a great description of him earlier today. He comes to mind almost immediately talking about Valley Crucis. Prior to the Civil War, we hear something of his ministry is driven for education, particularly. The evangelical zeal to spread the good news, his commitment to taking word and sacrament in the Episcopal tradition into the far reaches, far corners of the state. But on the heels of a very lengthy and severe fever, Bishop Ives solidified his commitment, bit the bullet, made his first trip here to the mountains in 1842. He traversed the foot and cow paths to the open valley where Dutch Creek meets the Watauga. Roads at that time followed the riverbeds. And then he did something that probably all of us did when we drove up here. We took 194. It wasn't called that then, but he trekked up the little stream from the Watauga. And listen to this description of where he came through. And think about where we came just off of 194. Trekking up the little stream to a winding path through a narrow gorge amidst dense woods and thick undergrowth, past huge oak, plentiful chestnut, maple, hemlock, he found himself at the convergence of the three creeks, which is just here in the valley. The only visible building was a grist mill. The only sound other than the birds and chattering squirrels were the waters lapping over the rocks in the creek and the miller's active water wheel. Of this first visit, he said, while my sympathies were deeply excited in view of their great spiritual destitution, my admiration was at the same time awakened by the simplicity of their character and the deep earnestness of their petition for instruction, and I promised to send them a missionary. The first missionary he sent was the Reverend Henry Prout. He would be a great study in and of himself, a faithful service. Ives purchased 2,000 acres of property. Where he got the money, I don't know, particularly when we think of all the other challenges that he had in the past. But he wanted to establish a divinity school, vocational school, and a farm. The larger context of the Episcopal Church at that time in this country was one in which, in the 1830s, we were filled with the winds of the spirit of mission. It seems as though there had been decades of missionary efforts here and there, and the organization of the church seemed to be catching up with the missionaries who went before. An example of this on the national level was the church's consecration of its first missionary bishop in 1835, Jackson Kemper. He was elected by General Convention to, get this, oversee missionary efforts in Missouri, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. It makes complaining about the hour-and-a-half drive to Asheville seem pretty lame. But Kemper established a frontier seminary, as we heard, at Nashotah House, Wisconsin in 1844, still in existence. It should be noted that's 2 years after the vision and establishment of the work here in Valley Crucis. The overdue attention to the mission at this time came when the tensions and growth and catalyst in the Episcopal Church, Anglican Church worldwide, seemed to be growing. We heard of the Oxford Tractarian movement. I just had a weird thought. I had a girl at high school convinced that Oxford University was named after my Uncle Virgil. About 2 years. And I don't think she's spoken to me since she found out. At any rate, we heard about the movement of the Oxford Dons and the Oxford movement challenging the church to take the church seriously, who we are, what we're about, not just internally, but also externally. The issue of the Oxford movement and the challenges initiated by the national apostasy, the Acts of Parliament, actually began to get to the very essence of who we are as Anglicans. We saw succeeding controversies and arguments about Anglican theology and ecclesiology, the effect on the American scene, and at home and abroad we began to see a church fight that pitted high church Catholics against low church evangelicals, broad church folk, committed to comprehensiveness head-to-head with purists calling for rigid orthodoxy. In 1844 it was challenged by General Convention, where it was held in Philadelphia. Just the previous spring there had been deaths in anti-Roman Catholic riots. So there's more going on in the world than just what we're talking about in the church. There was a Catholic bishop present at the General Convention, Patrick Henry, trying to persuade all bishops and priests to come on over to the Roman Church, because once Anglicans realize the roots of who we were and what we are about, then everybody's going to be Roman Catholic anyway. The controversies and the occasional accusations of heresy and of apostasy grew, and then the storm clouds within the church began to get larger. But in the midst of all this, all of the great controversies, we have the arrival of a man that transformed and also laid the foundation of mission and ministry here in the mountains, William West Skiles. They say that he was a humble farmer and later deacon from down east. He was born in 1807 down in Hertford, North Carolina. He was described as short, slightly stooping, and partially bald, and gave him the appearance of greater age than he actually was. Very unassuming. He was the perfect choice by Ives. He was knowledgeable in agriculture, timber, lumber management, construction, and a devout Episcopalian. He saw that he had a keen intellect, natural abilities, but also a stoic endurance. Qualities that would be tested to the maximum here in these isolated mountains. The daily routine of him and the other fledgling divinity students was this. Rather strenuous. Daily offices were read in a very crude chapel 3 to 6 times a day. The rest of the day saw 2 hours of divinity studies, 2 hours teaching the local children, and the rest of the day and often into the night working and tending the farm and the animals. Meals were prepared and eaten consisting of vegetables raised on the farm, eggs, occasional venison, rabbit, squirrel. Most evenings, bread and milk. On Sundays, they would travel to various missionary outposts. But the years also consisted of travel throughout the northwest quadrant of this state, going as far as Virginia and Tennessee in mission work. In 1847, we saw changes come here to the mission. Ives made an extended visit that summer, and that was the summer that he established, we find, on his own, the new monastic order. Impetuous is a very good word for him. Stuart. Adherents of this were clergy as well as the divinity students. They were excited about this new dynamic in the history, and they saw no problem of the implications. Everyone else, though, in the state was surprised or shocked or confused. On August of that year, William West Skiles, Jarvis Buxton were ordained deacons into the Holy Church. Buxton would later remain in this diocese, as we heard earlier. He served Trinity Asheville for over 40 years, as well as Lenore. Skiles remained here as a deacon in the valley for the rest of his life.